Novin had owned the spice merchant stall in Port Sector 7 for nearly a decade, but nothing had prepared him for the moment she walked through the marketplace. Her skin held an iridescent quality, shifting between deep purple and crystalline blue, depending on how the station's artificial lights caught her. Her eyes were enormous and multifaceted, like gazing into polished gemstones, and when she looked at his stall, he felt something inside him shift irrevocably. She was Krethian, a species rarely seen in human-controlled spaces. Their kind had always maintained distance from humanity, viewing most human customs with cool detachment. But this one approached his stall with undisguised curiosity, her slender fingers reaching out to examine the various spices and dried goods he'd arranged so carefully. "What is this?" she asked, her voice like wind chimes, lilting and strange. She picked up one of his specialty items, a traditional human sausage he'd made that morning, still warm, seasoned with his family's secret blend of spices. Novin grinned, recognizing an opportunity. "That's a human delicacy. My great-grandmother's recipe, actually. It's called a sausage. We cure it, season it, sometimes cook it over flames. It's savory, rich, one of the most beloved foods in human culture." She turns the cylindrical meat over in her fingers with scientific interest, examining it as if it were a foreign artifact rather than food. "It appears primitive, unrefined. Your species consumes this intentionally?" Her words might have stung if they weren't delivered with such genuine curiosity rather than malice. Novin laughed instead, a warm, genuine sound that seemed to intrigue her further. "Try it," he said, preparing one for her on a small plate. He'd cooked it to perfection, its surface glistening with rendered fat and caramelized edges. "Before you judge, taste it." Zara, that was her name, she told him, approached the sausage with the same cautious intensity she'd directed at everything else. She brought it to her mouth with the deliberation of someone conducting a scientific experiment. Novin watched, unable to look away, as her lips parted and she took a bite. Her reaction was immediate and visceral. Her entire body seemed to shudder, her multifaceted eyes widening impossibly further. She closed her eyes, and her skin cycled through a rapid spectrum of colors, purple to blue to violet to a deep crimson he hadn't seen before. When she opened her eyes again, she was looking at him with something that might have been wonder. "That's, CH, extraordinary. The complexity, the layering of flavors, the sensation of it dissolving against my sensory receptors. It's almost overwhelming." Novin felt heat rise in his chest. He'd never experienced pride quite like this. Pride in food, in humanity's contribution, and strangely, in her reaction. "There's more where that came from," he said softly, "if you want to try." And that was how it began. Zara returned to his stall every day for the next week, sampling different items he prepared. Each discovery seemed to excite her more than the last, and Novin found himself preparing things with extra care, wanting to show her the best aspects of human culinary tradition. They began talking between tastings about her world, her species, why she'd come to this remote station so far from Krethian territory. She worked in cultural research, she explained, studying how different species adapted to shared spaces. What neither of them acknowledged was that she kept finding excuses to return, and that Novin had begun anticipating her visits with an intensity that bordered on obsession. Her presence at his stall became the highlight of his day, the moment when his carefully ordered life suddenly felt possible, expansive, full of potential. By the second week, Zara had requested special access to Novin's private kitchen space, ostensibly for her research documentation, though both of them knew the real reason. She wanted to understand the process, to see how human hands transformed raw ingredients into something transcendent. Novin showed her everything, the way he selected spices, the precise temperatures required for proper caramelization, the intuitive feel of knowing when something was perfectly cooked. Her questions were relentless and precise. "Why do you use heat?" she asked as he prepared a roasted preparation of vegetables and meat, the natural juices binding with herbs into a glossy reduction. "Heat changes the chemical composition," Novin explained, enjoying the opportunity to educate her. "It breaks down proteins, releases flavors that exist locked within the raw ingredients. It makes things more digestible, more flavorful. It's transformation through energy application." Parenthetical. "Fascinating," Zara murmured, leaning closer to observe. Her shoulder brushed against his, and he noticed her skin flush a warm amber color. "Your species has developed sophisticated understanding of matter manipulation." Novin found himself smiling at her formal way of speaking, at the careful distance she maintained, even as she pressed closer. "Is that what Crethians do instead? Consume everything raw? Our nutrition is absorbed through crystalline matrices," she explained. "We don't experience consumption as a sensory event. Food is merely fuel. But this," she gestured at the steaming preparations, "this is something else entirely. This is experience, aesthetic engagement, pleasure derived from chemical interactions across your sensory organs." The word pleasure seemed to catch in the air between them. Novin turned to face her fully, and her eyes cycled rapidly through colors. Uncertainty expressed in chromatic language. He was beginning to understand. "There's more to it than just sensory pleasure," he said carefully. "There's also the pleasure of sharing, of creating something with care and intention, of watching someone enjoy what you've made." Zara's skin deepened to a rich indigo. "I don't experience pleasure in the way you describe. My neurological structure is fundamentally different. Emotions, sensations, these are foreign concepts to Crethian physiology." But as the days passed, Novin noticed changes. When she tasted something particularly exquisite, her color shifts became more dramatic, more reactive. She began describing sensations with tentative language, describing the warmth of hot food as pleasant, the melting sensation of perfectly cooked fat as unexpectedly gratifying. Her carefully clinical observations became punctuated with moments of genuine enthusiasm that belied her claims of emotional distance. One evening, as Novin prepared an especially elaborate meal, a centerpiece of his culinary artistry, a marinated and slow-roasted cut infused with rare spices, Zara watched with unusual intensity. When she tasted it, her reaction was almost violent. She went absolutely still, every color in her spectrum cycling at accelerated speed. When she looked at him, her eyes were flooded with an emotion he couldn't quite name. "I don't understand what's happening to me," she whispered. "My physiological responses are exceeding normal parameters. I'm experiencing something I have no classification for." Novin reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he took her hand. Her skin was warm now, pulsing with colors that deepened at his touch. "Maybe that's okay," he said softly. "Maybe some things aren't supposed to be classified. Maybe they're just supposed to be felt." The annual trade festival brought thousands of merchants and travelers to Port Sector 7. Novin had reserved a prominent booth, and he spent the day preparing an array of dishes to showcase human culinary achievement. Zara attended officially, she claimed, to continue her research documentation. Unofficially, Novin suspected she simply wanted an excuse to spend more time with him. She wore something different that evening. A flowing garment in shades of silver and deep blue that seemed to shimmer with the movement of her skin's color shifts. The effect was hypnotic, and Novin found himself distracted multiple times, nearly burning preparations while watching her move through the crowd. As festival night deepened and the crowds thinned, Novin closed his booth early and guided Zara away from the marketplace toward the observation deck overlooking the asteroid field. They'd created this tradition, stolen moments where they could simply exist together without the pretense of cultural research or merchant transactions. "I've been having unusual dreams," Zara admitted, sitting beside him on the bench. The asteroid field spread before them like scattered diamonds. "In them, I experienced the sensation of your food, but intensified. My cognitive processing becomes scattered, focused only on sensation and something else I can't identify." Novin's heart accelerated. "What else?" "Something involving you," she said quietly, her skin cycling through vulnerable shades of pink and lavender. "In my dreams, you're closer. And I'm experiencing something my species classifies as impossible. We don't experience physical attraction or sexual desire. Our reproduction is cerebral, intellectual, a union of consciousness rather than bodies. Yet my physiology is generating response patterns that contradict everything I've been taught about my own species." Novin turned to face her fully. "Zara, are you telling me that you're attracted to me?" "I'm telling you that I'm experiencing responses I cannot suppress or rationalize," she said, her multifaceted eyes meeting his. "My body is changing. My sensory receptors are heightened. When you're near, my processing efficiency decreases by approximately 17%, and I find this increasingly acceptable rather than problematic." Novin reached for her hesitantly, and this time, she didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned into his touch, her skin flushing a deep rose color that was almost translucent. When he kissed her, it was gentle, exploratory, a question asked in the language of physical touch. Her response was tentative but genuine, her lips unfamiliar with the gesture but eager to learn. They spent hours there, on that bench, overlooking the asteroids, discovering new ways to communicate beyond words. Each touch, each kiss, triggered visible reactions in her skin. Novin found himself cataloging the colors, the gold that appeared when he touched her face, the deep crimson that flooded her skin when he kissed her neck, the almost white luminescence when her responses peaked. "I want to experience more," she whispered against his shoulder. "I want to understand what it means to feel as your species feels. Teach me." End of. What happened over the following weeks transformed both of them in ways they hadn't anticipated. Zara's physiology, once she began opening to sensation, revealed itself to be far more capable of pleasure than her species' collective knowledge had ever suggested. Novin became her devoted educator, introducing her carefully to increasingly intimate contact. Her first complete sensory experience happened in his quarters. After he'd prepared a special meal meant to elevate sensation, aphrodisiac spices combined with textures designed to stimulate every receptor. As she ate, her skin cycled through colors with increasing rapidity. Her breathing became shallow, and her eyes fixed on him with unmistakable desire. "Show me," she pleaded. "Show me everything I'm supposed to feel." What followed was tender and profound. Novin moved slowly, attentively, reading her color shifts to understand her responses. When he entered her, she gasped, a sound alien to her usual measured tones, and her entire being transformed into luminescence. Her colors synchronized with his movements, creating a pattern of light that was almost spiritual in its beauty. "It's so much," she cried out. "My sensory inputs are at maximum capacity. I'm experiencing neurological overload, but I don't want it to stop." For hours, they existed in a space beyond their respective species' understanding. Her body responded to his with increasing confidence, her movements becoming less tentative, her vocalizations less restrained. When she climaxed, the light emanating from her skin was so bright that Novin had to shield his eyes, watching through squinted lids as she experienced pleasure so intense it seemed to remake her from within. Afterward, as she lay against his chest, still cycling through satisfied colors of deep sapphire and contented violet, she spoke with wonder in her voice. "My species has been so limited. We've denied ourselves these experiences for millennia, classifying them as irrelevant to our evolution. But this is transformation." Novin held her carefully, aware of the significance of what had just occurred. She wasn't just experiencing new sensations. She was evolving, adapting, her physiology and psychology merging with aspects of humanity through their connection. Her skin had taken on permanent coloration changes that her species would recognize as aberration, mutation, corruption of proper Crethian genetics. But neither of them cared. Over the following weeks, Zera made no attempt to resist the changes occurring within her. Her species' cool rationality began to warm with emotional capacity. Her movements became more expressive, less calculated. She laughed, actually laughed for the first time, a sound like crystalline chimes dancing in the wind. And when she moved through the marketplace with Novin, now, her hand in his, her skin displaying colors that advertised her transformation, no one dared comment. They were witnessing something extraordinary, the impossible fusion of species, the triumph of connection over biological limitation. The summons came from the Crethian High Council 3 months after Zera's transformation began. They demanded her return for analysis, claiming she'd been corrupted by human influence, that her genetic and psychological alterations represented a threat to species integrity. Novin received the message with dread, understanding that this was the moment when choice would matter most. Zera could go back, claim she was conducting deep field research, potentially convince them that her changes were temporary. Or she could choose something unprecedented, refusing to return, accepting permanent exile from her people, building a new life in the liminal space between worlds. "I want to stay," she said immediately, when Novin presented the options. Her skin flushed a warm, determined gold. "I want to stay with you. I want to continue experiencing this connection, this feeling of being alive, in ways my species never understood were possible." But Novin wouldn't let her make that choice easily. "You'd be giving up everything," he reminded her. "Your status, your culture, your connection to billions of Crethians. I can't ask you to make that sacrifice." "You're not asking," she replied, taking his face in her hands. Her multifaceted eyes were now flecked with gold, a permanent change caused by their bonding, her species' way of marking permanent attachment to another individual. "I'm choosing, and I choose this. I choose you. I choose the taste of food, and the sensation of touch, and the experience of pleasure, and the overwhelming feeling of love that my species has no name for. I choose the human experience. So they made an application to the Unified Commerce Council, requesting joint citizenship in the neutral territories. It took months of bureaucratic processing, but eventually they received approval. Zera officially ceased to be property of the Crethian Collective, becoming instead an independent entity with status across multiple jurisdictions. They married in the traditional human way, though Zera insisted on incorporating Crethian elements. Her colors synchronized perfectly with Novin's throughout the ceremony, creating visible harmony that observers described as almost transcendent. They honeymooned, traveling through sector stations, Zera experiencing everything with the enthusiasm of someone discovering life for the first time. A year into their marriage, Zera became pregnant, something her species had declared impossible given the genetic differences. Her pregnancy was difficult, her body adapting to carrying a hybrid child. Her colors fluctuating through ranges no Crethian physiology was designed to manage. But Novin was there for every moment, preparing special foods that soothed her discomfort, holding her through the physical and emotional transformations. When their daughter was born, she had Zera's multifaceted eyes and iridescent skin, but Novin's warmth, his capacity for immediate emotional connection. Her skin flushed with contentment as she nursed, and both parents wept at the sight of her. A living symbol of two species transcending impossible boundaries. Novin's restaurant eventually became famous across the trade sectors, renowned not just for its culinary excellence, but for the love infused into every dish. Zera worked alongside him, having discovered an unexpected gift for understanding the chemistry of flavor, for creating dishes that carried emotional resonance beyond mere sensory satisfaction. Years later, when someone asked Novin the secret to his culinary success, he would smile and gesture to his wife, whose skin still shifted through colors with each emotional thought. The secret, he'd say, is understanding that food is just the beginning. The real nourishment comes from connection, from sharing, from vulnerability, from choosing to experience the world alongside someone who changes every molecule of what you thought possible. Zera would reach over and squeeze his hand, her colors flooding with the deep gold of permanent love, and observers would suddenly understand that they were witnessing not just a culinary partnership, but the living embodiment of transcendent human connection. Proof that some bonds transcend biology, species, and cultural expectation entirely.